Timothy chapter 3, starting in verse 1. Like we said, we're going to try to speak about warning signs. First verse says, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come," which is dangerous times or deadly times. "For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent," which is probably no self-control, "fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." Chapter 4, in this same chapter, verse 3 and 4 says, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned to fables." This is all speaking about what men will do in the last days, warning signs of what people will do, how they'll turn away from the truth, Bobby, how they'll act today. Those claiming to be Christians in the latter times, in the latter days. And there's warning signs all throughout the Bible of the Lord's coming, Brother Keith. And there's many in the world today that are ignoring the warning signs. How the Lord said and how the apostles said and what happened before Jesus comes. But we're going to give you a couple of things that you might know. You've heard of these. You might not know that they actually had warnings. Most of you've probably heard of the Roman city, Pompeii, right? How Mount Vesuvius erupted and destroyed it. But did you know they had several warning signs? There's thousands of people died in this city. But they say weeks before Mount Vesuvius erupted and destroyed that city, there were several small earthquakes took place. They said all the rats in the city and the small animals of the city, weeks ahead of time, were all leaving. The streams near the mountain, the little tiny streams, all dried up. And they said the river that was real close to the city of Pompeii got so hot it was almost boiling. But the city, they ignored all the warning signs, thinking that this volcano was dead, it'll never erupt again, but they were all destroyed. They ignored it. They didn't take heed to any of the warning signs that were there. Now, this is one I didn't know. Titanic, that everybody's heard of, one of the most famous shipwrecks ever. They said that they received at least 5 warnings that night of icebergs. Didn't take heed to not a one of them. And thousands of people, about 1,200 and some people, lost their lives. And today, I believe that's happening throughout the world, but not just with thousands and hundreds of people, but with millions and millions of our people today are not taking heed to the warning signs of the Bible that says Jesus is going to come back.
That's right.
Most of those signs are with men, Bobby, how that they would act today. We remember how that Noah went and told his generation. God says he's going to send a flood, but Bobby, not a one listened to the preaching of Noah. How that God was going to send a flood, because they'd never seen it happen. I'm not going to preach you nothing today that you've never heard before. I'm just going to preach you something today that, like Bobby said, if there's ever a time that we really need to get out with our people and witness to our people and pray for our people, it's now, because we shouldn't be ignoring the warning signs. The world, we know, is, but we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be ignoring the warning signs that's happening in the world today. we should be taking notice to it more than anybody else. But Noah's generation ignored it, and we know they were destroyed by the flood. Lot went and warned his city. The angels said they were going to destroy it, Bobby, but they didn't take heed to it. And Lot's own wife ignored the warning from the angels himself. Said, don't look back. Don't look back. And today, if there's ever a warning to the church, don't look back to this old life. Don't turn back to it, man, because this place is going to be destroyed. Jesus said, no man laying his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of heaven. I don't think many really understands that, Keith, because we use tractors today. But when they would use the oxen to pull the plow, you can't plow a straight line looking back this way, seeing what's behind you. Your plow will be going all over creation. Jesus said you're not even fit for the kingdom of heaven looking back. We got to keep pressing to that mark, as we preached the last message maybe that I preached today. But Jesus preached many, many warning signs in the Bible about you and I, what we would see happening, Bobby, before he came back. And a lot of them's in Matthew 24 and in Mark, his gospel, and Luke throws some of those warnings out, how that things would be happening in the world. And we can go into the Old Testament and see signs. And I know I've preached on some of this here and recently or in the last few months, Brother Rick, but one of the biggest ones is in knowledge increasing in these last days. I don't know how many of you keep up with scientific things. I really don't, but occasionally I'll click on it. That James Webb telescope, the things that it is seeing out there in space, it's literally seeing stars being born, galaxies being born. There's habitable planets, Bobby, or they're in a habitable zone, whether they're habitable or not, that are bigger than the earth. And God said in the Old Testament, there'd be signs in the heavens. We'd see them. Well, how are we seeing them? We're seeing them through that telescope. God, the God that we serve, that we say He created, God is still creating. He's still creating things. He's not done, Bobby. He's still doing things out there in the heavens. God is still doing things in the earth today. Can you imagine another 100 years if Jesus were to tarry? I don't think He is. But can you imagine where man will be in 100 years? You might think, well, we won't be nowhere. Really? Today, in my lifetime, you young people, you teenagers, and you young 20-year-olds, and maybe even some a little younger than that. In my lifetime, they did not have cell phones. In my lifetime, they did not have the internet. In my lifetime, Rick, they didn't have really modern day computers. They had them. We didn't run around with phones in our hands and in our pockets and things like that. Google was never heard of in my lifetime. And some of these older ones can tell you things like that. Now, growing up, they may have been here. I'm not sure. They wasn't no microwaves in my house growing up. Never heard one. Didn't know what they were until I was in my late teenage years. Didn't know what a microwave was. They might, like I said, they might have been here, the older versions. But I didn't know what one was. Mom and Dad didn't have one. Rick, our house did not. And didn't have air conditioning when I was growing up. But these are just small things. But can you imagine all the technology that we have if we last another 50 to 100 years? What's going to be happening? What does the Bible say about that? Daniel, years and years ago, thousands of years ago, said knowledge in the last days would increase. I believe man is going to get. Remember the Tower of Babel that God destroyed? Now, I don't know what kind of scientific ability they had. But God destroyed that because He said there'll be nothing kept from them. They were all coming together as one people, Bobby, and combining all their knowledge together and coming up with things that God Himself said there'll be nothing beyond their capability. So He destroyed them. Now, what's happening today, spiritually speaking? If you're here today and you don't know Christ, or you feel like you've drifted away, you might want to listen. What has spiritually happened in these last days with a little old computer or a little old cell phone? You might say, well, Kelly, I'm not following you. You were in a minute. We went for years and years and years, thousands of years, that man really could not communicate with one another. Nations couldn't communicate with one another, Rick. But now, through a little cell phone and a computer, we can communicate with every nation in the world, every nationality, every tongue. That little cell phone, Bobby, they'll write something in China, and right under it, it'll say, do you want this translated? You can click and it'll translate it for you. Knowledge of the world is all coming back together, Rick. We're building that Tower of Babel again. God is opening up knowledge today, giving man the opportunity to either realize He's given it to us, or giving man and woman the opportunity to say, look how big we are. We don't need God. We create ourselves. We're getting to the point where we can do almost anything that we want to do. How close are we getting? I believe we're close enough to where you can go watch Star Trek, and some of that stuff is not beyond man's capabilities. I believe you can go out there, and I believe we're going to get so close, Bobby, that they can recreate every organ in the body and keep men and women living for I don't know about forever, but for years and years and years. And God is giving us these kind of things. But not only are those things happening scientifically and medically, and the knowledge we've gained and the things that we're seeing God do out in space, but Jesus said that the nations would rise up against the nations today. Today, the winds and the waves, spiritual winds and the waves are roaring. Have you ever seen such an agitated generation? That's why I think I'm getting more and more like my dad. I'm beginning to understand my dad more and more the older I get. He never liked to leave the house, Rick, because I don't think he liked to hear people. Have you ever seen such an agitated generation? All they want to do is fight and argue. I've never seen nothing like it. Families arguing in the middle of Walmart. Never seen nothing like it today. Just back and forth. Agitated people. And like Rick said, some of Heather's relatives fighting over there in Kentucky for years. The Hatfields and McCoys. And they are related to them somehow. Over a hog. And I bet the young generation didn't even know what they was fighting about. I just hate them. I don't like them. What are you fighting about? Well, I don't know. But we don't like them today. That's what we're living in today. Amen. We've got all the technology and advancement right in our hands, and we're still fighting over hogs. Amen. That's nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Jesus said the winds and the waves would be roaring, and I think that's not only natural waves, where hurricanes and tsunamis and things like that, but I think it's spiritual. The winds and the waves is roaring inside of people. We're expecting something to take place, and something is going to take place. Jesus is going to soon return, and He said, don't miss all these warning signs, just like they did at Pompeii. Don't miss the warning signs like they did with the Titanic being sunk. Don't miss the warning signs a lot of people do in tsunamis, Bobby. I've watched videos of this, and I'm like, you crazy moron. What happens when a tsunami comes? The waves in the ocean will draw back for miles. And I watch people on videos walking out here. I'm like, don't you realize what's coming? That's a warning sign that the ocean is getting ready to pour in. And people just walking out through there. I'm like, okay. We're missing a lot of the real warning signs, how that families, and go back and read those if you get a chance, and see the behavior of men and women, how that we're incontinent, we're fierce, we're despisers, they're despisers, not necessarily you, but they're despisers of anything good, anything that calls itself good or holy or godly. The world despises it, Brother Keith. They're traitors. They'll turn on you on a dime. Like Bobby. They lie, cheat, and steal. Men are getting worse and worse to do these things in the last days, Rick. And it gives us those warning signs today. They're heaping even the churches that used to be true churches today. They don't want the gospel preached anymore. They don't want hell preached. They don't want sin preached. They don't want judgment preached. But they're heaping to themselves with teachers with itching ears. What's that saying? It'll tickle their ears. It's all about, and I believe in love, don't get me wrong. I believe in love, I believe in joy, I believe in peace. But Bobby, there's a time for that. But there's also a time for to preach against sin, about judgment, about righteousness, and things to come. But they're heaping to themselves teachers that'll tickle their ears and just say, oh, well, you're here. We're all going to heaven. The Joel Osteen crowd. You're here, so you're going to heaven today. That's where they are. We're all good. And that's fine, but that's what they want today. And you'll see the church after church after church heaping to themselves teachers and pastors and preachers with itching ears. These are warning signs that the Bible gives us. Don't miss the warning signs. Amen. They're here.
Amen.
And as we stand this morning, don't miss the warning signs. They're out there. You can see them. It lets us know something's happening. What did Jesus say would happen? He said, when you see these things in Matthew, and I think also in Luke, or Mark 13 maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe 13 or 18. So when you see these things begin to come to pass, know it's near. It's even at the doors. Jesus wanted his church to be ready, to be prepared. He didn't want them to be in the dark. He wanted us to be able to see the day and the time that we're living.